there indications that the job creation numbers will continue? Well, we've had 22 months of job growth, right?
All the conditions are there for job creation. Balance sheets of the private sector corporations are in good shape. Profits have done well for many, many quarters already. Corporations have the money to hire. The developing world is putting demand onto the market. Exports nationally have done well. They've done fine in the state. There is a demand for the types of products that we make and services we deliver worldwide. We can capture that. And it looks like that could begin to take off. We saw venture capitalism spending increase in this last quarter, did very well in Massachusetts. There is a lot of activity over the new technologies related to communications in the iPhone. And we're seeing stories of new software companies developing here in the state. Medical science has been doing well, and it looks like that will continue to do well in the future. There's certainly worldwide demand because of aging and increasing wealth that will support health demand, and we will pick up a good part of that.
Right?
You know, Anthony, I agree with what Alan's saying, but what he's reflecting is there's an ability for the job machine in the United States and for the economy to do better. So the question, I think, then comes back down to why isn't there a willingness? Why is there such high cash coffers among business and when profits are so strong? And I think that comes back to a point that I made before about liquidity needs. I know our own company has got a 20% growth in top-line revenues and better than that in EBITDA, and get them to spend a nickel is very, very difficult, you know, in new investments and so on. And so we're seeing that. And so I think just to bring in the, I don't know if Carol, Alan hit this already, but bring in the political equation here a bit, you know, I think the willingness is being inhibited by the inability of the political sector, whether it's in London, whether it's in Europe or whether it's here in the United States. I mean, if you are thinking about investing your cash, and then you say, well, what's the economy going to look like? And you say, well, I think the economy is going to slowly grow, but there are a number of dark clouds, right? There's a whole question of what's Congress going to do with the payroll tax and the unemployment extension in February. There's a whole question about what they're going to do about the $1.2 trillion that has to be cut beginning in the beginning of 2013. There's a whole Bush tax cut issues that have to be decided. There's the debt limit issue that has to be decided somewhere in December. There's an election in November. So as you look at all that, and you say, gee, I don't know whether some of that could cause a situation like happened in the summertime where, you know, we had a political debate in Washington which adversely affected consumer and business confidence, a downgrade in the S&P. The market sort of tanked for a little while. That could set back aggregate demand, and that could leave me out on the limb a little bit. So my willingness is not, my ability is there. You know, I know so many people who got the ability, there's just the willingness. And so that cloud, what's interesting, that whole cloud has got nothing to do with economics. Right? It has nothing to do with economics. And you think about Europe, there are some huge solvency issues, but you could do better if we got rid of some of these dark clouds. And I think the public is getting tired of this vitriol, but I don't know if that translates into action that we want.
Kara?
I don't disagree that we're 4 years into a 10-year process. And that's a good thing. It's better than being 1 year into a 10-year process. But, and I think it's actually quite optimistic because it goes back to what I was saying before, right? We have headwinds. We don't have a disaster, but we have headwinds. And the last 10 years before this, we got all the advantages of global growth and low-cost wages. The price for that was debt and a recession, depression, whatever you want to call it. And I think that there really are great companies and great leaders who have been able to adjust to this and move forward. They're in sync. They have to be smarter. They have to be nimbler. They have to have better products. They have to have workforces that are trained and differentiate them. They have to have strategies that make them unique. They're making choices about what they do and what they don't do, which is what I think Ray is saying the governments aren't doing, and I agree with that. But, kicking the can this time is kicking the can to our children and their inability to have what we have had for all of our lives. And if you look at companies, you can look at a company like Apple, right, with a tremendous innovation. There's no money to be had in the world anywhere. They are going into China with the iPhone this month, okay? There's going to be a lot of money in China for iPhones. JetBlue and Southwest, you go fly on any airline, JetBlue and Southwest are actually making money. And while no one enjoys flying, people enjoy flying more on Southwest and JetBlue than they do on others. There's companies like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, right? There's companies like Henkel. There are companies that have created sustainable business models that are increasing their employment, that are deploying their cash, that are doing that in a global environment where the underlying economies are horrible. So I think there is tremendous hope, but I think it's about leadership and business and management and the people in this room, whether you're running a big company or a small company, how you differentiate yourself, live within your means, identify the workforce, train it, retain it, make sure that it's out there doing what your customers want to have done and taking advantage of all those things. Now, another really good thing is this is an election year. And so historically, as an investor, right, they will do everything they can to accelerate liquidity and to put into the market whatever they can do between now and the end of the year. So there may also be a little bit of hope in a U.S. sense that we're going to get even more stimulus and more programs than we would in a non-election year. So I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but I think what you see is what you get. And living in this world with these tools and being a creative manager and leader who can make it happen despite all of the headwinds is what it's going to be about for the next 6 years.
Go ahead.
I agree with both Ray and Carol in the fact of the problem that uncertainty has had with demand. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's just a matter of degree is my disagreement. I see this as we're in year 4 of a 5-year process. And 2012 can be slow growth, but slow growth with a lot of uncertainty, especially coming out of Europe. But we've been building pent-up demand meanwhile. All those kids who have moved back with their parents is pent-up demand for housing coming forward. And once the economy starts growing, it could start growing rapidly. And so 2013, next year when we're here, if we're here next year at this time, right, we could be saying, look, this year coming up is going to be a really strong one.
Well, if I might just jump into it, I think the question is, I remember in the write-up for this panel, we had some questions going back and forth, and one of the questions you had, Anthony, was, how do we turn on the engine of growth, right? And what is the engine of growth? The engine of growth in our economy is the private sector. Mm-hmm. And if the private sector is being held back because of the uncertainty issues, I think you really have to speak to that political issue as being a real impediment. That's right, number one. And then just quickly, too, Carol's point about she's concerned about the debt, I agree, and the way we usually think about that is debt over the income or over the GDP. And absolutely, but that's a ratio. And although that debt is extreme, one of the ways to solve that problem of the ratio is to grow the denominator, right? There's been a lot of focus on austerity, which is to reduce the numerator, which does have to be addressed, but the ultimate solution is to grow the denominator. And anybody in business who's got some debt, thinks about it that way, and why shouldn't public sector think about it that way too?